Hello, this is Dan Nowman. Niswander. You are watching the Nowman Show. Here with me today, I have Zac Hyden. Hello, Zac. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm I'm doing a lot better than I have been. That's for sure.
It's good. Good to hear.
You created a nonprofit called Automotive Free Clinic. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's correct. We started at the beginning of the pandemic. We started Automotive Free Clinic, which is a free and low cost automotive repair shop. We charge commercial costs for the parts, which saves about 75% on the markup, and labor is donation based. We started off doing mobile. We did stuff in people's driveways and in the street and stuff like that, which was really terrible. And we moved into a 3 base shop, and we recently moved into a 7 base shop. So we're doing pretty good. We've gotten some institutional support from Highlander Research and Education Center, and some of y'all probably know who that is, and from our church, First Christian Church of Montgomery.
So you're
We're
located now in Montgomery, or are you in Prattville,
at
Alabama?
Prattville. I live in Montgomery. Prattville and Montgomery, there's 200,000 people in Prattville, and there's 200,000 people in Montgomery, and there's, um, 25,000 people in Prattville, and they're kind of suburbs of each other. To give you sort of some context, it's a lot smaller than the greater Los Angeles area. It's quite a bit smaller than the greater Los Angeles area. Alabama has 5 million people in the entire state. So there's more people in Los Angeles than there is in the entire state of Alabama. So,
That's true. That does give it a lot of perspective, for people
yeah.
listening and watching. I grew up in a lot of small towns and rural areas in Ohio, Indiana, and Oklahoma. So, I know the wide variety. I've lived in Los Angeles, Tokyo, and in a very small town with like 500 people.
Yeah.
So, and everything in between. So for people who may not understand that perspective, it's a different world when you live in a rural community in a small town, definitely.
Yeah.
And even in a smaller city, it's a different vibe.
I think it's important to recognize, though, that all of these little small towns are already globalized. Walmart is the number one employer in the state of Alabama. We have
Mm.
Timber, we have Mercedes, we have Toyota, Mazda, Hyundai, and our economy is oriented towards export for the global market. So, even though these are really small towns and some of them are real provincial, they're still totally globalized.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, is that I lived in different parts of the country and you'd still see McDonald's or Burger King, and
Hmm.
these franchises are everywhere. It's
Hmm.
even though culturally speaking, there's a lot of differences specifically,
Right.
because every area of the country I've lived in the United States feels like a different country in certain ways. It definitely
Yeah.
does. And there are people that God love them, they live in bubbles. They don't really know the world outside of that bubble. And that's another, reality that we face here in the United States too, and probably around the world too. It's not just, it's part of the system, right? It's built into the system to
Sure.
kind of keep people separated and uh, to where they don't really know how other people live. Um, and now, what got you interested, I mean, in creating something like the Automotive Free Clinic? I know as a little bit of background, you actually went to grad school, right?
Yeah, I graduated. I I was an auto technician before I went to college for seven
Oh,
years. I didn't go to college until I was 24 years old. I did pretty good in undergrad, and I went to grad school at Berkeley. I finished there, got my PhD, became a community organizer in Birmingham, Alabama, which is a pretty decent sized city. It's 1.2 million in the metro area. I became a community organizer in Birmingham, Alabama. I did that for 7 years. I helped get Randall Woodfin elected mayor. He turned on us. I was crushed, devastated. I said I'm never going back to organizing again, and I went back to working at a dealership in Montgomery. And when the pandemic hit, I kind of felt like that things were going to change,
hmm.
um, for the worse, and not necessarily just because of the virus, but because of everything associated with it.
Yes.
And I felt like I had some leadership skills and I had some technical skills, and I could put those to work for the community.
That's fantastic. And you got exposed to different kinds of political perspectives too, correct?
Berkeley was easy. Like, let's just say that. Let's just say it was really easy, but it was probably one of the most transformative experiences of my life because I met scholars and activist scholars and community organizers really from all over the world. And, what I recognized was that Global South scholars and the conditions that were on the ground in Alabama were not that different.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, our people are dumping waste in our communities. People are extracting our natural resources. People are abusing our labor. And the Global South scholars were talking about the same types of situations. And we've come to start talking about the South as an internal colony of the United States, and in the sense that we provide the raw material for the lifestyles at the coasts, and much like Mexico provides the raw material for the lifestyles at the coasts. And so, yeah, that's kind of where our analysis of the South is. And one of the things that we're trying to do is rebuild the South in a way that we actually control the wealth, and the processes that create the wealth. We have a network of about 6 organizations across the South, from West Virginia to North Carolina to Alabama. And we're developing cooperatives, doing mutual aid, doing educational stuff, teaching people how to be leaders. That's kind of our network is called the Educational and Economic Resource Organizing Network. And yeah, that's been going on for about a year and a half now. And we're having our second meeting for starting potentially a community development financial institution to drive cooperative development, particularly in Southeast Appalachia. But hopefully that would spread to all over the South.
That's fantastic. And all this work started basically when you began the AFC, the Automotive Free Clinic, right? That
Yeah, we're kind of the flagship. I mean, if you kind of have a pirate utopian type of political leaning, which I do, I kind of think of the Automotive Free Clinic as the flagship of the fleet. But everybody in the fleet has important roles to play as well.
Going back to the 1960s, Rosa Parks and all that in Montgomery, right? The activism was, to make sure that you didn't have to sit at the back of the bus. You could have a seat at the table, so to speak. Woolworths, you could sit at the counter and this kind of, so you have a seat. The politics over time, by the 1980s, they had basically taken the buses away.
That is exactly right.
And it's not walkable. So it's like, if you have, let's say, leftist politics, or shall I use the word, be bold and use the word communist, socialist. If you have those kinds of politics, and then you got a person a seat at the table, but then you didn't allow to confront the corruption to happen. So you got the seat at the table. Now the seat's taken away from you.
Yeah,
so
they destroyed the table and built a new one.
Right, exactly. And that kind of feels like, don't you feel that that's kind of where we are now? And as you look at it, but you've been seeing that in the South already, but as a whole, do you think that that might be one of the things that we need to take a look at in the last few years, is what has been taken away from us? And once it's taken away, you can't get it back, or you have to work extra hard if you want it back. What are your thoughts on that too?
I mean, my concerns over the last 3 years are, one, that the powers that be have learned how to use social media to manipulate people in a very profound way.
Yes.
And what they've done is they've attached moral riders to every single political position out there, and that has narrowed the band of acceptable political positions to almost infinitesimal. The other thing is the attacks on bodily autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
I am against vaccine mandates for the same reason I am pro-choice, and that's because I believe in individual bodily autonomy, and that is a hallmark of Enlightenment thought that we should not throw away.
exactly.
And I don't know all the details of how vaccines have hurt people. I know some people have been hurt by them. I know some people have been helped by them. But the idea that you can make somebody take a medicine or fire them is a scary type of power grab on the part of the state. And like you said, once the state gets these powers, they're unlikely to give them back. And my concern is not necessarily with COVID-19, which is sort of past.
Hmm.
My concern is these new powers that the state has. What do they use them for next?
Right.
And what is the next crisis in which we're told we can't have a certain opinion, we have to put something in our body, we have to stay in our houses? And California is a little bit different than Alabama. Alabama didn't really lock down at all. I was out and
Hmm.
about the entire time. Um, but it still managed to transform the way that politics worked in the United States uh, for the worse. And what it has done, it is limited the range of political possibilities to a very small and narrow band, which they were already limited. You know, Noam Chomsky talks about how limited they already were.
Yeah.
They were already limited, and now they're even limited even more. The only thing you're really able to fight about is culture war crap, which you know people have weird ideas about culture because it scares them, you know.
Yes.
And but if we could come together on some things like mutual aid, like cooperatives, we could work out the culture war stuff. You know, if we could get
That's a
people.
great point. And a lot of too, that's when people talk about cooperatives, I'm introducing this conversation into more broader audiences now. Since the pandemic, I've connected to more people that would tend to be like more right leaning, that are not aware of that those exist. And so I'm kind of in some ways educating them about that, from the left perspective, or whatever that even means anymore.
Right.
And then I can bring some of the mandatory lockdown stuff. People that are so-called left, they might not understand, why that's a concern about, loss of liberty and loss of freedom. So it's redefining so many different things right now, like what patriotism is, what your stand on freedom, top priorities. I mean, when I interviewed Dennis Kucinich once, if you know who that is, the congressman from Ohio who ran for president, he's a great guy. And he said, you really can't just take one issue and say, and that's it. We have to address all of these issues simultaneously. And he says, I think we're capable of doing that. But I also came to the conclusion that we also need top priorities. Yes, they're all priorities issues, but we need top priorities. And then we need to find ways to bring people together to unify on creating actions based on top priorities. And then we'll go from there. Education, right? And understanding, what the problem really is. I mean, what are we facing here? There's a handful of people with each new crisis that just take advantage of that crisis, right? To basically just take more of the wealth. And then they can use a certain portion of that wealth to come around and like be the superhero and say, here we are to save the day with a problem they created. So we saw, I learned from Professor Richard Wolff, how that really is a lot what the Depression was about in the 1930s. And then we had a movement from the left, basically, which a lot of people don't even know about, that it was two socialist parties and a communist party with the CIO, the beginning of the big AFL-CIO labor movement, at that time. And that was the coalition that really sat down with FDR there in the White House and said, look, we have a problem here. It wasn't the Democrats and Republicans. They kind of came on reluctantly because they just, FDR realized that, you better get on board because we got a serious problem here. So it was, a lot of history was not understood. Even to this day, there are people that still don't understand that history. They don't understand the history of Eugene Victor Debs. He was so respected in the socialist circles. I mean, he ran for president more than anybody else in the history of our country. Woodrow Wilson had him imprisoned, and he still got 1 million votes during the election season, even though he couldn't go on the campaign tour. So there's a history in the state of Oklahoma, one of the states where I live. They had at one time a huge socialist a membership there. So a lot of this history is not understood, and this gives us an opportunity now to sit down with people that might not have been interested in knowing about this and sharing that information, and then we can learn from our brothers and sisters where their knowledge is and share that with others that might not have been open to on the left, and help bridge gaps and bring people together and take a look. Really, we really need to take a look at solutions. And would you agree that it sounds like that you are an advocate for what I think are the most important types of solutions economically, which would be worker-owned cooperatives or cooperatives in general,
Yeah.
both, and mutual aid projects, things that might even tie into like what they did in Ithaca, New York, and Brixton, England, creating their own currency, or there's crypto, there's people doing the U.S. national thing, which is something that the founding fathers did allow to still exist. And again, a lot of people don't know that there is U.S. citizen, there's U.S. national. You could be both. There's a lot. What do you think about solutions?
I think there's a difference between what happened with the socialist parties and the CIO in the 30s and what's happened with radicalization now. In the 30s, people got radicalized on the shop floor.
Yes.
In 2023, people get radicalized in academia. And that's a different type of radicalization. One of them is about solving problems, and one of them is about ideological conversion. And for me, I'm about solving problems.
Yes, I hear
And
you.
I don't care if you're a Trump supporter. I don't care. If you want to come to the shop and work, you're in my community. Period. And if we need to have a conversation about something later down the road, we can, but we've never had to have those conversations. In fact, we did a redneck studies class, a 6 week long redneck studies class, and we had conservatives and radicals and liberals and all types of people. And one of the most conservative guys in there at the end of the class, he said, "You know what I think? I think they're just trying to keep us divided."
Exactly.
Exactly. Exactly. We got a lot more in common than we have. We're different. In fact, most of us are kind people.
That's
Most
right.
of us want to help others when we can. A lot of us don't have the time to because we're working 80 hours a week.
Exactly.
But most of us want to help others when we can. And mutual aid is a way of life in the state of Alabama, especially in rural areas, because there ain't no government in the rural areas to come and help. So people got to do for themselves. And for me, and I think for the network, we want to build institutions around what people are already doing and enhance that and build. I believe that the American empire is crumbling.
Yes.
The decisions that are being made at the top of the American empire are ludicrous. And I believe that it is our job as caring human beings to build a society in the ashes of the American empire so that people won't suffer, so that people can be able to survive, so that people can have the things that they need, and to build that society better than the one that we're replacing. And if that's socialist, it's socialist. If it's libertarian, it's libertarian. It doesn't matter what you call it.
That's right. That's right.
It's just solving problems. It's
That's
just
right.
looking out there and looking in your community and saying, even if all you do is go pick up trash in your community, that's solving problems, and that's a political act. That's more of a political act than getting on Twitter and telling somebody they got white privilege or some crap like that.
Right.
Uh, so for the future, we want to build this network and grow this network in a way that we can provide for the needs and desires and hopes and dreams of the people in our community, and B, we would like to eventually be able to build something in the ashes of a crumbling empire.
That's fantastic because you've hit it spot on, I believe. Because I felt that you first have to identify what the problems are before you can work on solving them. And then I also hear in what you're saying is also what we're discussing and trying to do here, get people to at least get there, is educate ourselves and each other about what is really needed. And sometimes it does require some historical perspective to be able to see, how do we get to where we are now, right? Which I think is very important. And then, like the gentleman that you just mentioned, say you have an educational class. What was that called?
Redneck studies.
Rednecks. I love it. I love it. See, and people need to understand that we really all are one. It doesn't matter what terminology that you use. You know what I mean? Because I know there are people that get called elites that probably hate being called that word because they're good, kind people. You know what I mean? So it's the full spectrum of that. But I see education, and then and as that happens, you're socializing, you're getting to know one another, or you're working together on repairing cars, because people don't know, if they can trust, their capitalist mechanic, or their local mechanic, or whatever the term you want to use is. They don't know if they can trust that person, so they come to someone whose focus is on helping people, and they feel more comfortable, especially when you can have those kinds of conversations where you actually feel welcome, where everybody's welcome, and there's not this, this focus on, as you were saying, the academic aspects of the politics, but more, of the on the shop floor version,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
people identify with that more, I think, as they really think about this. Then you can start actually having these conversations, say, well, there are these things called worker cooperative. There's cooperatives, for one thing, just the whole attitude of a cooperative. There's and then you get more specific about worker-owned cooperatives. You can talk about a coffee shop. You can talk about a mechanic shop. You can talk about Mondragon in Spain, which is,
Yeah.
has 81,000 some worker owners. And I can talk about all these things now with people, and they're like, I've never even heard of that. It's like, well, that shows you that there are different ways that people can come together. There's mutual aid projects that you can do, and all sorts of things, that just thinking outside the box, that we can do for ourselves, and also in our local communities where we live. But also, I'm realizing, because we are all Americans, if you will, in the United States of America, there's also that extended view of community too. It's even global, making connections and friends with people around the world, and somehow eventually you have this like amazing extended family, of people that, on the basis of just, hey, we care about each other, end of discussion. Or if you have a political issue that you need to deal with, like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is saying now, as he's just begun his campaign, just do the right thing or tell the truth. That's
Yeah.
it.
Tell the
You
truth as
know,
you see it.
it's pretty simple, right? When it
Yep.
comes right down to it. And so it's great to be able to connect the dots. So what is the name of this organization that you have perpetuated, as far as the cooperative entities?
It's called Sand Mountain Cooperative Education Center, and it's not my organization. It's a friend of mine's organization. Some guys from New York came down here about 4 or 5 years ago and started doing research, and started a summer camp, and then have grown into growing cooperative businesses. So yeah.
Wow. So is it how many are in the network now? Do you know?
There are one, two, three, I think five organizations in the network. Yeah.
And are they about educating people, and offering tools and
One
resources
of
for?
them is a urban apiary and farm, and they do educational classes. One of them is a disaster relief organization, which they do not do educational classes. They go and like do crazy stuff. And one of them does summer camp, which is a leadership training class. And one of them does harm reduction up in West Virginia. And they don't do a lot of educational classes. We do a little bit. I have a Substack, which all the money from the Substack goes to the Automotive Free Clinic. I have a Substack where I make videos 2 or 3 times a week, and that's sort of our educational arm of the Automotive Free Clinic. But really, what we're trying to do is we're trying to reach out nationally and globally and talk to people about what we're doing here, and also like tell them like maybe the solution is this, what we're doing, maybe, and at least it's an experiment that seems to be working. So, more or less working.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, we would like to reach out and meet more people all across the world to learn from us and us to learn from them.
Exactly. It's because that's what mutual aid is, right? It's
That's what mutual
sharing
aid.
information and whatever tools and resources that you have, whatever that might be. For some people, it's being able to donate money. For some people, it's just a knowledge, wisdom base that, of decades of, learning. And just, some of it is just, connecting the dots, bringing people together, whatever that might be. Thank you so much, Zac. I wish we could talk for hours, maybe at time, sometime we can do a Zoom, who knows, a group meeting sometime, and people
Sure.
can, share thoughts, and that would be an interesting project that I think down the line we might have to do these kinds of things to bring people together around the country once we have found the people to connect to, right? Um, so Zac Hyden from Automotive Free Clinic, which is started out as a nonprofit helping people, get car repair with also educational elements. Also, and what's the name of that organization of your friend again?
Sand Mountain Cooperative Education Center.
Sand Mountain Cooperative Education Center. You can
Yeah.
find them, I'm sure, on social media, and they have a website
Yeah.
as well. Dot
Yeah.
com.
I think it's dot. I think it's. I don't know what it is. The .org website. I know.
Oh, dot
They
org.
recently launched the website for the Sand Mountain Cooperative Education Center. I know that their summer camp website is lamplight.org, lamplightsummercamp.org, if I'm not mistaken, or lamplightsummer.org. I don't remember. Um, yeah, I don't remember. Google
Yeah,
it.
Google's the best way to find the information, right? And you also have a Substack, and what is your Substack again?
My Substack is themadredneck.substack.com.
So check that out. And you can also learn more. Go to the website automotivefreeclinic.org too for more information as well about what Zac is doing with his specific work there in Montgomery and Prattsville.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks again, Zac. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Take
Take
care.
care.
Here on the Nowman Show, we've been covering all kinds of solutions, and a lot of the time focusing on cooperation, cooperatives, worker-owned cooperatives, or worker self-directed enterprises. We're on the Behavioral channel. We also have content out on Rumble, and as well as on YouTube and Odyssey. We've had content from Works, Worker Owner Resources Cooperative Services here in the LA area. We've had people in panel discussions, content from the National Federation of Co-ops Convention that was at LA Trade Tech, the trade school a few years ago. I interviewed Callie Acuna from Jackson Rising in Mississippi, representatives from the Arizmendi bakeries, and more in the Bay Area of Northern California. And there's more to check out. Professor Richard Wolf's Democracy at Work website as well. It's part of the solutions going forward. And let us know what you think. And also check out my new documentary, New Renaissance. I include solutions in that as well as a lot more. We need enlightenment. We need economic, spiritual, artistic, cultural, political. It's all about Renaissance and opening up and welcoming everyone, because we are one whole. This is Dan Nowman Niswander. And always stay present in the moment. Here now.